back to Disaster 365 radio show with your host, Alison Gordon, Director of the Department of Disaster Management and Emergencies. We are indeed delighted to continue our conversation with Ms. Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. Welcome back, Ms. Riley. And today's episode will really focus on successful partnerships. What are some of the projects that exist or the TCI has benefited from with DDME? And we also want to look at the whole matter of resources and capacity building initiatives for the TCI. Ms. Riley, welcome.
Thank you.
In our last conversation, you highlighted that during the period June 10 to 13, you actually shared in that high-level mission to the TCI. For benefit of our listeners, we just want to highlight that you mentioned some of the stakeholders that you would have met with, high-level government officials. You also spoke to some of the hazards that the Turks and Caicos Islands is exposed to. And you also mentioned some of the areas that DDME would have provided assistance. And I think this is a very good segue to go into today's topic or focus. Can you just tell us a little more about some of we know we have resource constraints, both human and otherwise. So how can the DDME assist us in that regard?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gordon, and thanks for having me back. So one of the major interventions that the DDME Coordinating Unit undertakes with our states is developing what we call country work programs. And what this is, it is a multi-sectoral, multi-year, results-based resilience program, which is designed to address the priority hazards of any of our states, but also importantly to allow us to integrate the social as well as the economic sectors in the resilience conversation. So for example, here in the Turks and Caicos Islands, we know that tourism is a major economic earner. And we want our tourism sector to be resilient. So in the discussions around the development of the country work program, the DDME will be reaching out to the Ministry of Tourism, also social sectors like health, education, and other priority sectors that are identified nationally to have a discussion around the critical actions that need to be taken to build resilience within those sectors. And we want to reflect those actions and the results that you want to deliver within the country work program. An important precursor to this, also supported by DDME, is the preparation of the comprehensive disaster management audit. And what the audit does is that it allows us to assess where the country is at with respect to each of the aspects of the disaster management cycle, and importantly to identify strengths, but also gap areas. And then these are prioritized within the country work program. And the country work program is really a very important tool. It's a tool to direct programming. We integrate climate change considerations within the country work program, particularly as it relates to climate change adaptation measures. So that integration is very important. And the country work program is also used to leverage resourcing in support of the priority areas that need to be addressed in the Turks and Caicos Islands and any of our other countries. And these resources come in many forms. It could be in-kind types of resources. It could be financial resources, which are identified through various partnerships. And it could also be through arrangements such as horizontal cooperation arrangements between the participating states. So for example, if the Turks and Caicos Islands identifies a particular area where one of their neighboring states has a strength, We could look at technical exchanges, and similarly, the Turks and Caicos Islands can lend its own expertise to other SEDIMA participating states as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to have a follow-up conversation on the country work program because I think it is very, very important. So, who are some of the stakeholders that are involved in it? And is there like a monitoring and evaluation framework that holds, you said it's multi-agency. So therefore, is there a monitoring and evaluation framework that holds these various agencies to their obligations and commitments within the country work program?
Absolutely. So the stakeholders in the country work program process are the stakeholders that make up the DDME arrangement nationally.
Okay.
So whilst DDME is seen as a specific individual institution, it is also a national level mechanism for coordination. So key first responding agencies such as the police, fire, ambulance services, civil society such as the International Federation of the Red Cross, as well as line ministries, whether they're economic sectors or social sectors, and including the private sector, are all invited to this conversation because resilience building, it's about all of us. And all sectors have a role to play because all sectors have to build their resilience to the hazards that inevitably are going to impact us. We know this is going to happen, and it's important for us to prepare ourselves, but also to be able to recover in very short time frames after we have the actual impacts. So you asked the question about how do we monitor? So this is a very important question because the country work program is designed to be results based. And what this means is that we identify for our strategic period, whether this be 3 years or 5 years or somewhere in between, what are the particular results that we want to deliver? What are the indicators that will allow us to measure whether we have delivered in part or in full? And we also have targets that are identified for particular time periods. So for example, if we had a 5-year country work program and we are talking about strengthening community resilience, in year 1, we may wish, for argument's sake, to target 5 communities. And our baseline at the start of the period would be that we may have no communities where we have the full community resilience frameworks being applied. And through the work that is done, say, collaboratively by the full DDME team in support maybe with the Red Cross, which is very important for the community type interventions, you work out a program of interventions within 5 targeted and priority communities. And at the end of that period, you then have a measurement to say, have we made the changes that we wanted to make in that community to make it more resilient? And if the answer is yes, against all the indicators that we've identified, we know that that target has been met. So this is what results-based programming is all about. It builds stronger accountability because the country work programs will also be laid in front of your cabinet. So government has sight of it, private sector as well as civil society who have signed on to support certain areas will then, everyone will be more accountable, and there's also a better accounting for all of the resources that have been brought to bear on the program. We can see what has been delivered, what has changed after that period of implementation.
I have a follow-up. Thank you for that. So the question is, who monitors? So after SEDIMA would have come in and give that support for the development of the country work program, 3 to 5 years, whatever time is determined, is there an obligation of the country to say annually you give this report, every 6 months you do that report? Who owns, who monitors? Could you share with our listeners a little more specifics on that?
Yes, so all parties who have been assigned responsibility under the Country Work Program are obligated to be a part of that monitoring process. And this follows because if we identify particular sectors where we want to do interventions, we anticipate there's a level of leadership and also a level of ownership by that sector. So if we target specific things for the tourism sector, it is anticipated that the Ministry of Tourism will play a leading role in the implementation with support from DDME.
Okay.
And there will be periodic arrangements as to the frequency with which we are going to measure whether the results have been delivered. And annually, there is an obligation on DDME and the stakeholders who have worked across the DDME system to provide feedback then and reporting to the cabinet to say in year one, this is what we have delivered. In addition, there is a requirement also for the tabling of annual reports against the Country Work Program to SEDIMA at the level of the Ministerial Council.
Okay. Thank you so much for adding that clarity. And we really look forward to having SEDIMA supporting and ensuring that the Turks and Caicos Islands Country Work Program is not just revised and updated, but executed as well. I really want to thank you for joining us, but I have one final question that I'd like to ask, and that relates to the whole matter of knowledge exchange and best practices amongst the SEDIMA participating states. Can you just share with us how this is achieved?
Absolutely. So there are many opportunities within the system for this, both formal as well as informal. So we have a very close network of national emergency management coordinators across the region, and I dare say they're a family. So it is very easy for one national disaster emergency management coordinator who is working on a particular area. It is a frequent thing for them to reach out to their sister or brother agencies and counterparts in the other states to share information. So that's more the informal side. But we do have formal structures within the arrangements of the agency. For example, the Technical Advisory Committee, which is an advisory arm of SEDIMA, one of its governance mechanisms, which is comprised of the national emergency management coordinators from each of the participating states, complemented by representation from regional agencies that work within our system. And we meet annually. We work out the details of the agenda for those meetings in consultation with the national emergency management coordinators. And this is a space where we exchange experiences and good practices. And in addition, every 2 years, we hold what is called our Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management. And this year, the 13th conference will be convened in St. Kitts and Nevis, December 2 to 6. And this offers a very direct opportunity for sharing good practices, not only within the SEDIMA participating states, but further afield, because we normally have representation from across the globe participating in this conference. And so the good practices can be shared both within the main conference setting as well as within the parallel youth conference, which is held during the same week.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Riley. Thank you once again for joining us on this our program Disaster 365. So we would have had our second discussion with Ms. Riley, and we look forward to the third and final discussion next week, when we will focus on the whole matter of disaster preparedness, disaster resilience, and climate change. So we invite our listeners to join us next week as we conclude our discussions with Ms. Riley. Thank you so much again. This has been your host, Alison Gordon, on the program Disaster 365.